act on these laws and how can we work together?
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a check of the top headlines this hour. US President warns Iran on stopping its nuclear efforts, says massive armada headed to Iran, hopes for Iran to come to table and make a deal. The US is also launching multi-day air drills in the Middle East, deploying a carrier-led armada as tension rises with Iran, while Washington signals both military readiness and openness to talks. UN warns of widespread misery for Palestinians as it urges Israel to fully open the Rafah crossing. This as Israeli airstrike, artillery shelling continue to pound Gaza. As Western powers crack down on migrants, Spain to give 500,000 undocumented people legal status, pointing to positive impact of migration. Man sprays US lawmaker Ilhan Omar with liquid, disrupting Minnesota event. Omar unhurt, continued town hall. Police arrest man for third-degree assault. According to SDF fighters and media reports, Russia has begun withdrawing troops and equipment from positions in the northeastern Syria, including a base near Kamishli airport. However, no official confirmation has been made by the governments for now. According to Syrian media reports, President Trump held a lengthy phone call with Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, and they reiterated the importance of diplomacy amid heightened tension with Iran. Amazon cut 16,000 jobs globally to reverse pandemic-era hiring amid AI push, marking the online retailer's second round of layoffs in almost 3 months. All right, let's now start with top focus. We're looking at Europe, where following a Council of Ministers meeting, French government spokesperson Maud Breguin has announced that France would back the adoption of new European sanctions targeting Iranian security and judicial officials. Breguin also revealed that discussions are ongoing with European partners regarding the potential designation of Iran's Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist organization. These measures are part of broader European efforts to address Iran's actions amid ongoing tension in the region. Let's first listen into what Maud Breguin had to say.
La situation en Iran, avec une répression d'une violence sans équivalent dans l'histoire contemporaine de l'Iran. Pour vous dire que nous soutiendrons l'adoption de nouvelles sanctions européennes contre des responsables sécuritaires et judiciaires iraniens lors du Conseil des affaires étrangères de demain. Et une réflexion est en cours avec nos partenaires européens sur la désignation des gardiens de la révolution comme organisation terroriste. À ce sujet, je veux être très claire, il n'y a aucun tabou.
All right, I now welcome retired Major General Sudhakarji in the discussion here. He's a senior strategic and international affairs expert and joins us from Jaipur. General Sudhakar, thanks very much for joining me here at NewsX World. How do you see France now backing European Union in declaring IRGC as and imposing sanctions on it? Also weigh in on the fact how IRGC actually stands for Islamic and not Iranian.
Yeah, Kriti, good evening. Thank you for inviting me for your show. As regards the questions which you have raised, there are two subparts to my understanding. Now, France backing the European Union and the Council about the stance against IRGC being added onto the list of terrorists. If we take our mind back, till yesterday, France was of a different standpoint, and it was not in favor of be it selected personnel of IRGC or members of other government agencies or the IRGC per se to be listed amongst the list of terrorists. And because the logic and the rationale behind France's previous stance was that it is very important to keep channels of communication open. Now, I suppose there would have been some behind the door discussion, some kind of mutual consultation. Now, France also has joined the rest of the group of European Union and joined them to put sanction against the Iranian organization. Now, this has got multiple implications. One, whatever openings of communication were available, they will be shut. So it will tantamount and lead to a kind of a collective application of pressure against Iran to come to the table for discussion. That is one. Second issue, it may agitate Iran. As it is, Iran has been pushed to a corner. It may compel Iran to take recourse to such kind of defensive or counter-offensive kind of measure, which may be prohibitive and may turn out to be detrimental to overall security and safety of the people of European Union, including France. So these are the two quick reflections from my side. As far as IRGC is concerned, IRGC, we all know, it's a paramilitary organization which has got a sway of control on the economy, on the military resources, on the hardware platforms, the missile platforms, etc., etc. They have a greater say and greater control and coordination. To actually brand it as a terrorist organization, again, it will tantamount to putting pressure as also corner this particular thing. My only apprehension which is coming to my mind at the moment, it's my personal take, that if you push a cat within the four walls of a room, it should not happen that the cat is left with no option but to pounce back, and that may hurt the aggressor much more than Iran. So that may turn out to be dangerous. So while people are actually applying and coming out with some solutions, it is important to weigh the pros and cons and the consequences of the decisions they're taking. Back to you, Kriti.
General, how do you view the fact that France until now had been, restraining itself from really calling it a terrorist organization, but it has agreed, of course, now to put sanctions based on the fact that it wanted to recall its officials that are still there in Tehran. How will that issue be resolved if it at all, if it, goes ahead to label, as with the rest of the European Union, IRGC as terrorists?
Spot on. You have actually put your finger on the right issue. There are two people, citizens of France, who are in the embassy.
Yeah.
And France has been making an all-out effort to extricate and get them back to their country. They have not been succeeding. But I am given to understand the turn of events in the last couple of hours is that there is some breakthrough. But as per my analysis, I understand how Iran functions to some extent, if not entirely. I think France has been pushed to a corner, it has been isolated, and it has been compelled to join the group European Union to put pressure against Iran. Maybe this is my guess, wild guess, that the pressure is coming from USA to put pressure against Iran so that there is a collective en masse kind of effort to make Iran come to the dialogue table and make it accept the demands that is being anticipated, which has been already formulated.
Right, General, thanks very much for your assessment of the situation. I requested to stay on. And now moving ahead, viewers, the Kremlin has said that any future meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky would require extensive preparation and a focus on outcomes. Russia's foreign policy aide Yuri Ushakov has stressed that this option has been discussed before, including in phone calls between Putin and Trump. Usharov has also stated that if Zelensky is willing, his personal security and working conditions in Moscow would be guaranteed. Let's listen in to these comments.
Вопрос для нас не новый. Он, кстати, обсуждался несколько раз в ходе телефонных контактов нашего президента Владимира Владимировича Путина с президентом США Трампом. И в ходе этих бесед Трамп, в частности, предлагал нам рассмотреть такую возможность. Не отказывались и не отказываемся от такого рода контактов. Главное, чтобы эти контакты были хорошо подготовлены. Это первое. А во-вторых, чтобы они были ориентированы на достижение конкретных позитивных результатов. Президент наш тоже несколько раз, общаясь с журналистами, говорил, что если Зеленский действительно готов к встрече, то мы приглашаем его в Москву, и при этом гарантированно обеспечим безопасность его и необходимые условия для работы.
This is not the first time Russia has suggested a meeting in Moscow. Last year, Zelensky rejected the idea and insisted that Putin should rather visit Kyiv instead. More recently, US officials have revealed that Zelensky and Putin were very close to setting up a meeting after peace talks mediated by Washington were held in Abu Dhabi last week. All right, I request General Sudhakar to join us back in the discussion here. General, how likely is it now that the two leaders, Putin and Zelensky, would actually sit on the same table without a third party? And what should that location then be?
Well, there are two issues in your question, Kriti: the desirability and the likelihood. The desirability, if we want some meaningful, substantive ceasefire or stopping this mindless conflict coming to an end, then in my opinion, it's about time. A statesman-like visit should be extended, and it should be undertaken by Zelensky, set aside all egos, all differences of opinion, walk across, go to Moscow. There is no harm in accepting the reality if you want to bring this conflict to an end. The reality is that Moscow or Russia is a bigger power, it is a stronger military might, and it is capable of decimating Ukraine if it continues further. That is the reality. So the Zelensky, despite he having no locus standi as a president technically and legally, he's playing a very important role. He has done a lot for his countrymen, although the flip side is that a lot of people innocent lives have been lost. While the guilt may overcome, but I would recommend that he has to hold his head high and take a bold decision, go to Moscow, sit down with Putin. He has sacrificed a lot in his life as a leader of the country, and talk it out, one for and all. It is always better to put the highest stakes and stakes and also the offers and talk one-to-one so that some meaningful substantive takeaway can be derived. Second point I wish to highlight, Kriti, if you have time, is that this is for the first time. I have been actually pointedly making this mention that the end state of any negotiation should be decided. This is for the first time in the remarks or the communications coming from both sides. They are indicative of the end state, the outcome, final outcome. Unless we are talking about the final outcome, the means and methods which should prevail to achieve that, the roadmap cannot be created, cannot crystallize. So it's a great thing which is happening, and I am very optimistic it will work because the US is putting pressure on Zelensky. He has been made to scale down his expectations, and times ahead there are great milestones towards peace and normalcy waiting to the world order. Back to you, Kriti.
Right, General Sudhakar, thanks very much for your comments. And now we proceed, viewers. Let's tell you that Iraqis have now voiced concern after US President Donald Trump warned that Washington would cut off support if former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki were reinstated. Speaking on social media, Trump said Maliki's return would be a bad choice, claiming Iraq fell into chaos and poverty during his previous time in power. He warned that without American support, Iraq would have zero chance of success. Iraqi political figures pushed back against the comments, stressing that foreign powers should not interfere in the country's internal affairs, while calling for balanced relations that protect national interests. Maliki himself rejected what he called US interference, saying he would continue working in a way that serves the supreme interests of the people of Iraq. Let's hear it.
احنا كنا مع المالكي ومع اي عراقي وكنا نرفض اي تدخل، ولكن مصلحة العراق وسيادة العراق او العراقيين يجب ان تكون في المرمى قدام اي شخصية تريد تستلم رئاسة. مصلحة العراق والعراقيين اهم من اي اسم او من اي شخص في المنصب، فلذا المفروض دوليا مقبول، اقليميا لا باس، يعني اكو موافقه عليه، وداخل.
الشعب العراقي عبر عن ارادته من خلال الانتخابات، واليوم لدينا ممثلين للشعب العراقي في البرلمان، وهذه هي السياقات الدستوريه. اليوم الاطار التنسيقي سيعقد اجتماع لبحث هذا الموضوع، ونعتقد انه تدخل غير مقبول، مرفوض جمله وتفصيلا، وسنخرج بموقف. الموقف الوطني يعتمد كما قلت على ركيزتين أساسيتين: الدستور العراقي وإرادة الشعب.
أن هنالك صراع ما بين أمريكا وإيران، فأمريكا تريد تحاول تجنب أو إبعاد العراق عن إيران، لأنه تعتبر العراق هو الحديقة الخلفية لإيران، وهذا هم ما يعتقدون. فلهذا نقول لأن الحكومة هي بالأساس أو نتيجة للسياسات الخاطئة، وهذه السياسة الخاطئة هي التي أوصلت العراق لها.
All right, Ross Feingold, who's a political analyst, now joins me in this discussion from Taipei in Taiwan. Ross, thanks very much for joining. Firstly, crucial here to note that it was during Maliki's time in Iraq that Islamic State had strengthened its stronghold in the country. Even as of now, without Maliki already in power, we are seeing IS radical elements spreading their tentacles. How bad the situation can really be should Maliki take over as Prime Minister?
The fact is, his record as Prime Minister is terrible. President Trump is making legitimate criticisms based on the history, and even U.S. officials at the time that Maliki was in power, it's well known that they were critical of him behind the scenes, and eventually publicly critical of him as well. You know, initially it started out as a good relationship with the United States in the aftermath of the invasion and the internal strife, but over time he just proved to be very sectarian, too close to Iran, and incompetent in leading the fight against the rise of the Islamic State. And that's why eventually a very broad coalition of both Sunni and Shia, even Iran, of course the United States, all wanted him to go. So, on the one hand, it's understandable that Iraqi parliamentarians don't want the U.S. to dictate to them who they should pick as their premier. On the other hand, given regional politics and looking at the situation frankly, antagonizing the Trump administration would seem to be an exceedingly stupid decision for Iraqi politicians to make.
Exactly, and it's crucial here also to know that Maliki was in fact nominated by the Shia Coordination Framework. How can that challenge really be addressed? Of course, Trump can go on and make these criticisms that are rather valid, as you say and I say, but it's for the people of Iraq to finally decide who rules their country.
Yeah, it is a majority Shia country, so assuming elections are free and fair, which of course is an issue that deserves significant discussion on its own, but assuming elections are free and fair, then it's no surprise that in a situation where political parties are aligned with the different religious communities, that a Shia majority would be in parliament, and thus they're going to pick one of their own as a prime minister. You know, the best we could hope from that situation is that even if the prime minister is inevitably a Shia because they control a majority in the parliament, It's somebody who's not going to govern in a sectarian way and who's going to work with the Sunni and the Kurds and other minority communities to build a better future for all of Iraq's people, to combat armed groups, frankly, to work with the United States, not to work with the regime in Iran, which is a nefarious influence in Iraq. But the problem with al-Maliki is, again, if we want to see a leader in Iraq who, regardless of which community he comes from, who's going to be a leader for all of Iraq's people, his record shows otherwise. And again, that's why President Trump's complaint is legitimate.
Right. All right, Ross, thanks for your comments. I request you to stay on with me. Moving now ahead, viewers, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned that Israel's enemies would pay an exorbitant price if they attack. Now, these statements came during the funeral of the last hostage recovered from Gaza. Speaking in Amitar, Netanyahu reinstated Israel's commitment to disarming Hamas and demilitarizing the Gaza Strip, emphasizing the country's determination to achieve these goals. Netanyahu's comments came as Israel continues its operations against Hamas, with the Israeli Prime Minister sending a clear message that any aggression against Israel would have severe consequences. Let's listen in first.
אנחנו דבקים גם ביעדינו האחרים, לפרק את החמאס מנשקו, לפרז את הרצועה, וגם את זה נשיג. ידעו מבקשי נפשנו, שמי שמניף יד על ישראל ישלם מחיר כבד מנשוא.
All right, I request Ross to join us back in the discussion here. Ross, how would you place these warnings now coming in from Netanyahu at a time when Hamas has actually agreed on the conditions of the round one of the ceasefire and finally returned the last hostages' remains?
Throughout the period of the war, after Hamas's terrorist invasion of Israel in October 2023, Netanyahu's position has been abundantly clear. Hamas has to go. At the end of this war, whether it's defeat on the battlefield or through the intervention of negotiating partners like the United States, or some of the Gulf countries, and Egypt have also been involved in that process on and off. Even if it was a negotiated agreement, Hamas would still have to go. They'd have to give up their weapons. They could leave the country, or sorry, leave Gaza, but they have to give up their weapons and cease to be involved in political life in Gaza. This position from Netanyahu has been unchanged. It's still unchanged despite the ceasefire that was negotiated last year. So Hamas can keep saying whatever they want. They can make whatever accusations they want. It's not going to change the position of the Israeli government. And frankly, at the moment, the Israeli government on this issue still has the sympathy of the United States. So even though President Trump wants to proceed with reconstruction, he's moving ahead speedily with organizing the Board of Peace. And the next step is going to have to be to find the money to rebuild Gaza. But at the same time, President Trump has no sympathy for Hamas. President Trump is not saying that, yes, Hamas can remain with its weapons in Gaza. Quite the opposite. So I think Hamas has to be very careful of doing something stupid. They need to do the right thing, which is to give up their weapons and to leave.
All right, Ross, thank you for your comments. We'll leave it at that for now. Moving ahead, viewers, let's also tell you that in Silwan, East Jerusalem, Palestinian residents are facing eviction orders to make way for Israeli settlers again. Families which have lived in the neighborhood since 1967 were served a court order to vacate by mid-March following a legal battle with the Israeli settler organization Iter et Kohanim. The organization has already taken control of around 40 buildings in Silwan and has offered compensation to some families, though many have refused to sell. The evictions come amid rising tension in Jerusalem, particularly near the Al-Aqsa Mosque, a long-standing flashpoint in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The evictions have sparked protests and are seen as part of Israel's broader efforts to increase Jewish settlement settlement in eastern Jerusalem, a move that Palestinians say undermines their aspirations for a future state. The issue has drawn international condemnation, with the United Nations urging Israel to halt settlement activity.
طبعا هدول الأوراق من المحكمة العليا وأوراق من دائرة الإجرة. تم تسليمنا من قبل قوات الاحتلال ودائرة الإجرة اجت معهم بإخلاءنا من المنزل اللي هو أعطونا مهلة لبعد رمضان. دعاتهم الكاذبة طبعا إنه كان يهود يمن عايشين بهذا الحي وإنه المستوطنين موكلين من اليهود اليمنيين إنهم يستولوا على هاي الأرض.
And as always, we wrap up with some technology news. Now, Amazon has confirmed 16,000 corporate job cuts, completing its plan to reduce 30,000 positions since October. This marks the company's largest ever layoffs, affecting nearly 10% of its corporate workforce. CEO Andy Jassy's strategy focuses on reducing bureaucracy and shedding underperforming businesses. The layoffs also follow Amazon's decision to close its French grocery stores and Go markets, alongside discontinuing its Amazon One biometric payment system. These moves come as Amazon embraces AI-driven automation to streamline operations following an overhiring spree during the COVID-19 pandemic. While Amazon executives stated that further cuts are not planned, they remain open to adjustments as needed. Despite the restructuring, Amazon's stock saw a slight rise in pre-market trading. And viewers, that's all we have time for. Thanks for watching NewsX World. For more news updates from around the world.